Hey, what's going on, Renaissance Lifers? Welcome back to Renaissance Life TV. I went camping and here's what happened. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, Renaissance Life TV is a channel for personal growth and success with a different perspective on navigating life and relationships. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content like this on a weekly basis. I post a video every Tuesday afternoon. Today, we're talking about why do people go camping. All right guys, so like I said, I went camping recently, but I didn't go camping by myself. I went camping with my wife, with my 5-year-old daughter, my 2-year-old son, my 5-month-old daughter, with another family of a husband and wife, their 5-year-old daughter, their 2-year-old daughter, and 2 other friends of ours. So needless to say, it was quite a trip to plan. This was not my first time at a rodeo, but this was definitely the most interesting and crazy time at the rodeo. I've been camping before and I love camping, so I should say that up front. In fact, I used to be a youth director and I used to take my group camping every year. So I love camping. So I want to put that out there up front before I get into this story. This was a different beast. So let me get right into it. So the first thing is we chose to go camping at Providence Canyon State Park in Georgia. And this is a great site. It's called the Little Grand Canyon by a lot of people because it looks like a canyon, which it is. But of course it's not as large as the Grand Canyon. It's still a great sight to see. It's really something cool that you have in the southeast where you get to see the same sort of effects of a Grand Canyon that has been eroded by water, wind, etc. So we've actually been to this site before. It's a great place to go and walk and see. This site is split up into sort of 2 parts. There's sort of the canyon experience and then there's the camping experience. So the last time we went to this trip, we did the canyon experience on our way to a couple other sites. This time we were bold and wanted to go camping as a family, which we've never done before, certainly not with little children. I've been camping with my wife before, so we kind of expected something a little bit different here. So before we went on this trip, I made a disclaimer to my wife, and this is gonna come back later in the story. I said to make sure that you only take what we know we can carry. So if you want to take something, just make sure you can carry it because we're carrying 4-5. And so that's going to become very important later on in the story. So we rented this 15-passenger van, which you can see up here. I think it was a 12 or 15-passenger van. We loaded up the families and we took our trip up. On the way, we took beautiful country roads and really saw some beautiful parts of the country, tons of fields that were growing all types of crops and animals and things like that. We even stopped on the road and picked up some cotton. So that was kind of cool, seeing cotton in its natural form before it's been used. So that was kind of an interesting experience. And so we finally made it to Providence Canyon State Park. Now, around this time of year, the sun is setting around 6 p.m. So the big thing for us was to get to the canyon early enough that we could be able to hike the canyon before nightfall. So here's the thing, when you're traveling with families and particularly little children, things never go exactly according to plan. So needless to say, we got to the canyon probably around 4-ish when we had originally planned to reach there around 1-ish. So we were already pressed on time. So by the time we were able to load everything on, which I'll post the picture up here or up there, and pack things into the bag, divvy out the food that we needed to take with us, it definitely was getting dark. Now here's the kicker. We were packing for 5 as a family, and the other family was packing for 4, and the other couple was packing for 2. The big thing was we were camping at a primitive campsite. Now, if you've never done primitive camping, all that means is you have no water, no electricity. You're just essentially in the woods somewhere or in a cleared out area in the middle of a forest. So a lot of times when you go camping, there will be restrooms nearby, or if you're doing RV camping, then you'll have, water hookups and power hookups typically for the RV, and that's at least something. and you'd typically have restrooms nearby. Now, because we were doing primitive camping, that means all the food that we're gonna eat, all the water we're gonna drink, everything we're gonna use to cook the food, everything we're gonna use to do everything that we're gonna do, we've gotta bring with us. So that meant that we would have to divvy up the rest of those things amongst the families and the people who were on the trip. So needless to say, once we got everything packed, I think I was probably carrying on my back easily 200 plus pounds. And I had our camping tent, which we thought was a good idea to get the largest camping tent possible for our family to make sure we were all comfortable and we could even have extra storage space. Bad idea. That tent was huge. It was a behemoth. I've never seen a tent that huge. And what that meant was that tent was not something that could conveniently be wrapped and placed on the back of my camping bag. It was one of those tents that I had to carry like this. So I had another 30 plus pounds on the front of my body during the entire time, plus the 200 plus pounds on my back and things hanging from the sides and things like that. So I was geared up. And everybody who was on the trip, both the men and women, were geared up to the T. So by the time we got everything packed up and actually hit the trails, the sun was setting. And so I should let you know that the campsite was 2 miles away from the parking spot. This is not one of those campsites that you can back up to and unload your things, go back to the car if you forgot something, or use your cigarette lighter hookup to be able to power some things so you have, like, you know, inflatable beds, which, by the way, my wife wanted to bring and did bring, which, by the way, my wife brought because she wanted the luxuries of an inflatable bed. And of course, I gave the disclaimer that if you bring it, we've got to be able to carry it. So we had to hike 2 miles to the campsite. Now, the way we figure it, when you run a mile, if you're in shape, you probably can run a mile in about 6-7 minutes, maybe 8 minutes. Walking a mile typically would take about 15 to 20 minutes. So we figured walking a mile with things on our backs might take us 30 or so minutes. And so 2 miles would take us about an hour. But this was not a regular hike. This was not 2 miles walking through Disney on flat terrain in Florida, where you're just kind of doing that distance. First, we were carrying hundreds of pounds on our backs. Second, this was not regular terrain. By no means was it regular terrain. Instead, this was some sort of Iron Man competition type terrain. There was the sludgy, marshy floor that had like fresh Clear Springs water, you know, flowing through the sand that you're walking in. So it was muddy. And it was beautiful, but it was muddy, and it wasn't that beautiful when you're walking with 200 plus pounds on your back. So in terms of the terrain, there was the sand with water running through it, so it was muddy. There was the thicker sand, which was kind of like beach sand with no water, so it was just kind of like walking through beach sand with 200 plus pounds on your back. Then there was your normal sort of wooded trails where it's kind of flat and just kind of wooded. And then the pièce de résistance was at the very end of the 2 mile hike, there was a steep uphill climb that lasted for what seemed like 10 minutes at least, with no sort of flat areas, just uphill the entire way. So we'd made this hike, and of course, within the first 20 minutes of the hike, it was pitch dark. So of course we had planned and had our flashlights and headlamps and things like that and spotlights, so that way we weren't in the complete dark. And I had a map, and there's no way else to be able to find your destination. And the trail was poorly marked. So the trail that we did was called the Backcountry Woods Trail. Just think about the name, Backcountry Woods Trail, or the Backwoods Country Trail. Some type of trail that had backwoods and backcountry in the name. So this was no normal hike. This was not fun because this wasn't exactly ideal, particularly because we had children who were also carrying things. So we had the 2-year-olds, don't forget, and the 5-year-olds, and the 5-month-old wrapped on mommy. So the kids were tired, the adults were tired, and I kept saying, you know, we're almost there. That's what we kept saying, we're almost there. And needless to say, we almost didn't make it. Between the dark, between the fatigue, between all the weight, and let's just say the blow-up bed that my wife brought, that she was gonna carry, the 2 miles stayed at about the mile marker. So I was really proud of her for carrying it that far because it was some type of a hike, but that blow-up bag did not make it to the campsite. Ultimately, we finally made it to the campsite after almost dying on this trail. And I will say that once we made it to the campsite, we did have to pitch our tents in the dark to get a fire going because of course we needed to make food, have our dinner, and also have a source of heat and warmth. Because of course the temperature was probably 40s and 50s, which typically is great weather to go camping because you won't be as hot, which is typically one of the main complaints about going camping, particularly in the summer. So the rest of the trip went pretty well. We enjoyed our time when we're at the campsite between, you know, cooking and just spending time together. And the kids say they had a blast actually camping. Not so much the hike, but the camping time. So we were planning to stay there for about 3 days, you know, leave the site one day and go fishing, bring back fish so we could like cook over the campfire. And needless to say, by the time we were going back to the car on the second day to be able to go fishing, we realized there was no way that everybody was gonna make that trip back again. So the only solution, without taking everybody back to the campsite another 2 miles after having walked 4 miles already, you know, my son had blisters on his feet. He would not put his feet on the floor. So we're exchanging children on our shoulders with the weight that we already have on. We're carrying, you know, my son from guy to guy. Thanks to the guys who were willing to help me with that. And so we had to decide what we're gonna do. We ended up cutting the trip short. Now, some of you may ask, why would you choose a campsite that's more than 2 miles from your vehicle where you can't actually drive up to it, especially with small children? And the long and short answer is, you would be surprised how hard it is to find a campsite, especially close to a holiday season. So we went the weekend before Thanksgiving, and campsites for like several hundred miles radius from where we live were booked. So this was one of the few campsites that was still actually available. And so we said to ourselves, 2 miles, we do that, you know, on a regular weekend, just, you know, doing other things. So it shouldn't be that bad. So that's why we actually chose that particular campsite. And we'd been to the canyon portion of this location before, so we knew it was a nice and pretty spot that we could actually see the canyons, do some camping, go to a nearby spot for fishing, which was a popular spot. In order to cut the trip short while everybody was back at the van, the 3 men and 1 of the ladies had to go back to the campsite by ourselves and carry back and retrieve everything that was brought by everyone on the trip. So what that means is we had even more weight. And so it was extremely crazy, but we were able to make it back after another couple hours of hiking just on our own. And everybody was able to go home safe and sound, and we survived the camping ordeal. So, lessons to be learned from this experience. Planning is everything, and while we did plan, I would never pick a site that is that far from the location where you can actually park your car, unless of course it's a survival event and every man or woman carries just their own stuff. That's certainly more doable. But what I recommend it for a family with small children, particularly 2-year-olds, is probably better to get something, you know, that's closer. Now the funny thing was, we could have went camping in our backyard. So we have a property that's over an acre, and there's, you know, some wooded portions. Most of it is cleared. You know, we have a pond on the property, so it makes a good spot, you know, for camping. But of course, we wanted to go somewhere else, you know, experience something different, see the canyons, you know, do some fishing and things like that. So I think in the next couple weeks here, we'll probably be doing some family camping on our property, roasting marshmallows, looking up at the stars and things like that. And I think it'll be a much more comfortable experience. So before I end this video, I'm just gonna talk really quickly about why would people go camping to begin with? Why do people go camping? So I think there are several reasons that I've experienced over the years, and I think generally people experience over the years. And so the first thing is there's something really powerful and profound about being in nature. So the closer you can get to nature, generally speaking, the more benefits you gain from it. It's called green therapy for a reason. So even the color green has therapeutic effects on our minds. There's also something primal about nature. When we are in nature, the mind thinks very clearly. It's sort of separated from all the clutter and the craziness that you kind of deal with on a daily basis. Most resorts and a lot of places you go to for an escape are surrounded by nature. And so, you know, camping is that face-to-face, it's as close to nature as you probably can get, because of course you're living in nature, you're cooking in nature, you're sleeping in nature, and you're doing everything actually out in nature. And so those are some of the benefits to actually camping. And I've had great experiences camping before. A lot of times people, when they first go camping, they kind of have their guard up and they're really defensive and trying not to enjoy it. And then eventually they catch themselves actually enjoying it. And so that used to happen a ton when I would take my youth groups camping. And eventually they're having a blast, and then they want to go camping every year. It's just a unique experience. Great way to do something different. So I definitely encourage you, if you're interested, to go camping. You know, planning is super important. Probably a good idea not to try to do the 2-mile arduous hike type camping the very first time you go. Maybe do something that's a lot easier and closer, where you can get the experience and enjoy yourself, and then kind of maybe ramp it up from there. But we survived our camping experience, so that's the moral of the story. If you have any other questions, or if you want me to do a video about things to think about when you go camping and how to plan a camping trip and what you should take if you go camping, you know, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to do a video like that. So if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe, comment, share your thoughts as to whether you'd ever go camping, and why you go camping if you are somebody who goes camping. And until next time, I'm wishing you health and happiness. Cheers.